He was 10 when he declared the war had ended. No generals bowed. No trumpets played. No signatures dried on gilded parchment. Just a boy in torn boots standing in the center of a burned-out village, pressing a charcoal stick to a ruined door. And writing, "This house is at peace. Please remove your shoes." His name was Liar. No surname. Not anymore. Not since the men with shaved heads and silent flags marched into the valley and taught the townspeople what silence really meant. They burned the school, the chapel, the bakery. They left behind ashes that looked like snow, and they did not return, because there was nothing left to take. But Liar survived. He had been in the attic, reaching for a missing sock when the walls shook. His parents were below. He never saw them again. No grave. No final words. Only a line of soot where the door had been. And so 2 mornings later, he stepped outside and declared, "Enough." He didn't say it to anyone in particular, but the wind paused for a moment as if considering it. The war, of course, had not ended. Not in the maps. Not in the cities beyond the hills. But inside Liar's world, it was over. He drew a line in the dirt around the rubble and called it a border. He hung a cracked teacup in the apple tree and said, "This is the bell tower." He sat cross-legged on the porch steps and took attendance of ghosts. Mother, present. Father, present. My left shoeless, absent. Forgiveness, working on it. On the 7th day, a soldier came. Not marching, limping. His coat was burnt. His eyes yellowed with infection. He didn't knock. There were no doors left. He just sat in the yard and stared at the boy. After some time, Liar said, "This is a peaceful zone. You'll have to leave your weapons at the border." The soldier blinked, then dropped his knife into the grass. Liar brought him water, and the man wept. Not loudly, just enough to make space for silence. The man left 3 days later. Liar watched him disappear into the hills, the knife still buried where Head left it. He placed a flower next to it, then scratched a new line into the wall. Day 10 hostile entry resolved peacefully. War still over. He taught himself how to boil water, how to talk to chickens, how to sleep without dreaming. He renamed the burnt chapel the listening place and sat inside each evening, reading aloud from books he couldn't quite remember. He kept a journal, even though he had no one to send it to. Day 17, no visitors. Sunlight good. Practiced bowing to no one. Feels correct. People thought the village had vanished. Maps erased it. Mail stopped coming. But the sky still knew it existed. Birds still crossed its border. And sometimes, rarely, someone lost would wander in. A woman with trembling hands. A man with bandaged eyes. A girl with too many names and none she wanted to keep. Liar welcomed them all. Not with grand speeches, but with tea, with rules, and with quiet. He made them write their own names again, even if they changed it every day. He taught them to bake, to sweep, to watch clouds like scripture. He told them, firmly, the war ends here. We don't ask about before. We don't punish memory. We just remember gently. And they listened, because no one had spoken to them like that before. Not everyone stayed. Some couldn't. Some left before sunrise, shadows still trailing behind them. But those who remained changed. Not all at once. But like bread rising, one night they painted a wall together, each person adding one word. No one told the others what it meant. When the wall was done, it read, "We are still real." And Liar smiled, because that was enough. He was 12 when the first caravan arrived. 2 horses, a wagon full of salted meat and bolts of cloth. They wore the uniform of the Southern Front, but they came without flags, only fatigue. They asked what town this was. Liar said, "Peace." The man in charge, a captain with stitched scars around his eyes, asked, "What are your laws?" Liar thought, and answered, You can stay if you learn to ask before taking. You can stay if you promise not to shout. You can stay if you know the sound of your own breathing. The captain said nothing, but he left the food and came back a week later with a book of poetry. News spread slowly, like warmth in old stone. They came not because it was safe, but because it felt true. Liar never took a title. He wasn't a king. He was the one who swept the ashes from the old steps, the one who rang the cup in the apple tree at dusk, the one who whispered the daily list of what had not been destroyed. The sky, the smell of mint, the small kindnesses of tired people, the possibility of new names, and he wrote, Day 146, no battles, one broken plate, one repaired voice. He was 15 when the war finally ended elsewhere. He didn't notice at first. There was no radio, no letter, just fewer bruises on the faces of those who arrived. More songs half remembered. More hands not curled into fists. And one morning, he woke and realized no one had cried in 3 days. He stood on the same step where he'd first declared peace, looked at the sky, and whispered, Now it's true. And the wind faithful as ever carried it. He grew older. Not taller, but wiser in the way trees are full of rings that no one sees, but which hold storms. He didn't count the days anymore. He let others tend the journal. And when someone asked him, years later, was it ever really over, back then, he said, Not for the world. But for us, yes. Because we said so, and then we acted like it, and that made it real. Peace is not the absence of war. It is the presence of something else. Liar knew this. So he worked. Every day. Not as a leader. Not as a prophet. But as the boy who still remembered how the ashes smelled and had decided that he would not live in that smell again. By the time he was 20, people no longer asked who had started the settlement. It wasn't a settlement anymore. He was a rhythm. People arrived not to be led, but to participate. There were no titles, only tasks. You sweep. They bake. She listens. He sings. It was enough. There were threats, of course. There always are. One day, a group of armed men arrived from the east, survivors of a militia no longer recognized by any government. They were hungry, tired, suspicious. The war had taught them how to take and had never taught them how to ask. Liar met them at the edge of the field. No weapons, just open palms and bread. He said, You can take what we offer, or you can keep what the world already took from you. They didn't understand, but they ate. And when they slept, they dreamed differently. One man stayed. He carved spoons for children, and never mentioned where he came from. Liar never asked. Some of the children born in peace didn't believe the war had been real. One, named Nome, said, You made it up to feel brave. Liar laughed. Brave people charge into battle, he said. They just refuse to. Vive. But isn't that cowardice? She asked. Maybe, he said. But cowardice that builds is better than courage that burns. He grew older, as all boys do when no one treats them like one anymore. His hair silvered. His hands stiffened. His breath came slower in winter. But he still swept the path every morning. Still rang the cracked teacup. Still whispered the list of things not broken. The memory of bread. The scent of pine sap. The sound of someone knocking gently. He never added his own name. But others did. When he was 41, someone built a small marker beside the listening place. Not a statue. Just a stone, smooth and wide. They carved into it, Here lies the story of the boy who ended a war. Not by force, but by pretending long enough that the truth followed. Liar tried to laugh, but he sat down beside it and wept instead. Not from grief, but because he knew he would not have carved it that kindly. When he was 56, a delegation arrived. Real uniforms. Clean. Boobs. Flags stitched with gold. A representative peace council. They called themselves. They wanted to document the village. Add it to their reports. Write down how it had started, what had worked. Was there a charter? They asked. A treaty? A philosophy? Lyre poured them tea. Sat down, slowly, and said, I didn't wait for permission. I just stopped believing we needed to kill anyone that day. And then I told someone else. And they stopped too, and we never undid that decision. They blinked. That wasn't what they wanted to hear. No diagrams, no slogans, just a decision and discipline. They asked to photograph him for the archives. He declined. He pointed at the children playing in the garden and said, photograph them. They're what happens when peace forgets how to explain itself and just exists. They didn't understand, but they took the picture anyway, and left quietly. He began to speak less, not out of wariness, but because he didn't need to repeat anything. But people remembered. The children led songs he had never taught them. The walls were painted with words he had only ever whispered. And the journal, now a community ritual, listed things like Day 4382, laughter at lunch, a new baby, rain soft as old paper, Lyre's final day began like all others. He swept the path. Lit the small candle in the listening place. Poured tea. Rang the cup. No announcements. No farewell. Just a sigh and a nod to the air. As if handing something invisible to someone already there. He died in his sleep. In a room that still smelled of bread. With the window cracked open, so the morning could find him. They did not bury him. He had never asked for that. Instead, they planted time. Because he once said, it remembers the shape of hands, and grows back, no matter how often you cut it. Years passed. Peace remained. Not perfect, but persistent. It cracked. It healed. It echoed. And one day, a child who had never known war asked, why do we still ring the cup? An old woman smiled and said, because someone once did, and the silence that followed was worth protecting. The war had ended. Not with treaties, not with monuments, but with a boy who had no army, no map, no audience. Only the conviction that pretending peace was real was better than surviving war like it was natural. And then others believed him. And that was enough. The journal was found inside a wall. No one was looking for it. They were trying to renovate what was left of the settlement, now just mossed beams and outlines of gardens. A group of architecture students from the city had come to study sustainable peace infrastructure, a phrase no one truly understood, but which earned them grant money. They'd assumed the place was a myth. But the stones were real. And so was the door. It was Nomi who found the journal. The youngest of the group. The only one who'd come without a research agenda. The others measured soil. Took samples. Discussed acoustic insulation. Sat on the floor of what had once been the listening place, now half-roofed, the corners overtaken by ivy, and leaned against the wall. The wood gave way. Behind it, a cavity. Inside, a leather-bound book, wrapped in cloth, dry despite the years. She opened it. No title. Just line after line. No names. Just moments. Day 6 thunder sounded like a whisper today. Day 104 someone made soup that made us cry. We kept the recipe. Day 229 the war tried to send a letter. We burned it. Then we laughed. Then we sang. Day 777 bread again. And no one apologized for smiling. Some entries were fragments, peace isn't quiet, it's just kind. What if we mourned what we destroyed before we destroyed it? Pretending was the beginning. The living was what came after. The list today, the smell of candle wax, a shy smile, hands held longer than necessary. Noma read it cover to cover. Then again. The others didn't notice her absence. When they did, she said only, we've been asking the wrong questions. They asked, then what's the right one? She said, who decided peace was impossible, and why did we believe them? She brought the journal back to the university. They filed it under local folklore, unverified source. But Noma didn't stop there. She scanned it, translated it, annotated it not with facts, but with feelings. She published it anonymously under the title, The Pretender's Journal. It was read by almost no one, at first. But one day, a former soldier of old now, walking slower than he once ran, found the book in a dusty library corner. He read it in silence, then left his medals on the shelf beside it, and walked home barefoot. A year later, a teacher in a border village used it in a literature class. The students laughed at first. Then they didn't. Then they asked to build their own journal. They wrote, Day 1 no shouting at breakfast. Felt strange. We'll try again tomorrow. Day 7 helped neighbor patch roof. No reason. Just time. Day 19 raid poem. About dust and soup and hands. Everyone cried. We called it forward grieving. Soon, others followed. Not loudly, but rhythmically. A new ritual began. People started writing journals not of news, but of what was not lost. Today, I remembered how to hum, saw a fox sleeping under the garden bench. We locked eyes. No war in that stare. 3 people left the room before arguing. We called it progress. The wind smelled like my mother. I sat down and didn't move until it passed. No one claimed to be continuing Liar's work. No one could. Because Liar never called work. He never claimed anything. He just lived as if peace was possible, and acted like it already was. Years passed. The journal spread. Quietly. Some called it fiction. Some called it naive. But some called it familiar, as if reading words they had almost written themselves, but were afraid to believe. Eventually, a filmmaker read it. She visited the village, or what was left of it. She stood beside the crack, teacup still tied to the branch of an apple tree long since dead, and whispered, I hear you. She made no film, but she told everyone she met, he did it first, and they didn't ask who he was. They only nodded. Because by then, the story had outgrown the boy. In time, the journal was copied onto walls, into songs, onto playgrounds, where children made pretend borders and then tore them down together. They didn't know Liar's name. They didn't need to, because pretending the war was over had become a kind of inheritance. Not law. Not doctrine. Just breath. Passed from mouth to mouth. One last child born in a century that barely remembered fire once asked her grandmother, did peace really start with a boy pretending? The grandmother smiled. No, darling. Peace started the first time someone looked at a broken thing and chose not to break anything else. The child thought, then asked, did it work? And the grandmother said, you're here, aren't you? Then she kissed the child's forehead. And the world stayed quiet just long enough to listen.